wal durumam masing kiri ko do tema mungul mamu sa temelala en kiri ko mungul sel wal teletara mungul agel hakimera bulu en mau desira bebak kemur kemau dos dari main mora akan kan sel gibo me gibo ngadu kalau suama ngagi dulu kalau suya gua kemarin masih aku bakal ngeras sodi albor tel kamera Allah nagi obrol kiri sel black mal mesa pergi kermir sekolah di kali so hari aku temel Allah sel roller abu bul belau tel kapan ketemu ada makwasin bingaria roller abu bul belau ngar sel siupa ngar kita dia kapri setiap bela kita terser ni saya kita timbel sisi lo melihat ni itu ni masih mengharap masuk el mengharap even though kalau mau presiden di bul bela nganya PCI dah setiap kapan
Rigole. When I went to school, I'm main major a history. During the time a history of one major what's need? Ngara need a historian as well. So I had a lot of historical experience. I'm also good life. I'm inspired another history of Israel. How did Israel become a state? Close influence because I read a lot about it. A lot about how they became a state. And the Iraq nation. From Nicola Israel in World War II in the nation of Israel. Up until 1949 and it became a state. When I was the president of Israel, I'm asking them to get a call. They are asking another. Okay, I've been curious. I'm not the president of Israel. The Palestinian girl, I don't care where you come from. Other American, you have a Jew blood, you are Israeli. Tell us Omara American ngari amla Israel la omara media kotor no. Di semua dia amla kan dia. Asal mo ala idea la amla bara Jew kau, dia. Sefale inspiration na. Lengaram le emiri. Terkata pisul bara bluril di Jew. Amende. Mu apne soal mu partini macam apa ada belau ngari abla berarti. Saya telah reason. I want Palau to be Palauan blood only. I support the concept of dual citizenship because of that concept. Dia kalau kirim other belau US citizen elang, belau itu mau other belau belum dia. Let him be US citizen. Di sini belau kita treating other belau. Other Israel lah macam. Amhita constitution kita elang which I oppose. Sel orang agak elang. Akar American, men kira-kira renounce settle American berat citizenship berat. Usul accept orang lain berat. Understandable one. Ini constitution elang awasnya. Al-Sugum ka arasal lung nadir malu soal belang. Emang ada lung gini renounce sih. Lalu pulau ada sok senjata gini macam. Jika mau supaya alum sera outside netmu, gini ala al-blad al-gid, ala alum sera outside netmu long sekali. Semle main nasional. Ulum no sokan boleh. Plaza Israel a sistema normalmente tenía parlamento. loss of confidence. Suma Allah awal dulu Prime Minister tinggal mil trablo madang lo maringin itu diberi nomor madang lo lenggel Allah stop right there jadi dalam itu presiden itu main mutu ada pak seguir la defensa siamo solo teoria costituzionale corso menino agim le lusso se accepta a Parliament not the either three branches executive okay.
Looking back, I would say that the inspiration to want to participate in the drafting of our Constitution came perhaps from the mood and the spirit of our generation. We were born after World War II. Our parents survived the war. We grew up under the U.S. administration, and we wanted to be a sovereign and self-governing people. So we wanted to participate in the process of becoming an independent nation. So with my background as an attorney, majoring in political science, I felt it was a unique, perhaps once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me and the people in my generation to draft a constitution based upon our sense of values and our political aspirations. And regarding the ideas that I wanted to include in our Constitution, being a person who was trained to be a lawyer, I wanted to make sure that we preserve the basic fundamental human rights. I was the vice chairman of the committee on fundamental rights. I want to make sure that every Palauan will be free to express their views on any subject. That's called freedom of expression. Will be free to follow their conscience in matters of religion. That's called freedom of religion. We'll have a society that protects your privacy, that ensures that every individual is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because I didn't want our government to be a police state. And above all, looking back, one of my contributions, which I'm proud of today, was to disarm the population by taking away their firearms, their guns. As you know, under the Constitution, possession and use of firearms carry a very stiff penalty. Also, I was responsible for the provision in our Constitution which requires our government to return lands which became part of public lands because the foreign powers took them by force or without just compensation. So now we're in the process of determining which lands were wrongfully taken, so they should be returned to the Palauan people. I also wanted to make sure that we have checks and balances in our government so that we can have our president and our OEK who together make the laws for Palau and to have an independent judiciary. Because the OEK enact laws subject to the approval of the president, the Supreme Court has the responsibility to make sure that our Constitution is not violated. So if the OEK and the President does something which contradicts our Constitution, the court can say this law is null and void. It's not valid. So basically those are my views on what inspired me and what were my ideas which I wanted to incorporate into our Constitution.
Sir, mga kamang, tawagan tilo at yung 2 hours and 3 minutes. Teacher, mga di mo sa gini, horrible mo tubdi mo publicly. Kung nasa malumuto nila, editing mo min, clean rin. Mo to mo public litya kami ang tingin natin may satyang. So, gadi ko mo sa gini, doon mo program. Sula.
I have spoken. May budule om the oriental stretch. Para fresh air. Marami kung mo daduin ang tukoy mga tagadu di kote gureng raungil Constitution Day mora rur Belau butusia sa mora idul marugul Belau markyang mar senators mar delegates mar ministers mar former framers sa Constitution aw timala rur Belau aw lumul January 28 and Mamarega April 2nd within 63 days ay kiro-kira ulit Kiam loringi ra uriu Belau aloko di ra FSM Constitution kama dire gamle involve ra komre asin kyora FSM Constitution loringi lakwi dengan October 1978 mablul alam ng longer Belau tengah todra FSM memorgir umurnya senkyo ya umis ya ada Belau agilti a dream team stegumdas swing wal naringia ula kraen Belau itu nok tu dibel dimle imo osnir na Belau dimle imo tu aro mesringi tangali mo hospital marupiu antara dirus mga dims disagree debate you had a one common goal to establish a sovereign nation of the Palauan people. So too many kids here who are less than 35 years of age, it's history. To us, it's a memory. Diwalelir kumang. Hindi ka nagugusag na kumakain sa oda, ay kilmagotmok, lemarababir, sa umis. Hindi ba isok, hindi mo smodiya, sil atmosphere, o sil time. Sil time ya Belau, at yung arar babal ni. Kundi nga ra-air to know. Yung arar pig, kokori rahel. Yung abengwa, tukura outside, ruspe, wakam radio, marama-marama. Sil time, hindi na kalporin niya computer. Mas takut mama tol low type lo. Remember arwa Mihaina Koshiba ele na sali bisina sali mangkina to kie kel rabilio mar betok la lulu type yang akamlin Vice Chairman ng Committee on Civil Liberties, Ebony Basyo may Chairman. Vice Sock lumot ke al, yung ay sirgimiw tilgem na selon tibel. They give me 38. El al sils, edim de el 12. Tilgem lagil tabalul may, ay mli ang tia Alfonso Oitrong amasa misikse. Ay raya singit si kasagas Dr. Anthony Peloy mapaules sa ulong. Ay ang yaura tia Victoria Belau Carlos Sali. Ang ayangal ahing takaw. Tirigin lingir tra oreor ay Father Felix K. Yao, Reverend Billy G. Cuarte, Kuniwa Nakamura, Lazarus Sali, Peter Sugiyama, Caleb Udui, Santos Silicon, and yours truly. Malagayok, Andres Tomei, Juana Rubulbay. Marar, Jan Targong, Laurentino Loong, Masarang Silmay. Esar, Moses Romaroy, Bonifacio Basilius. Maralong nga Masayugi Adalbay, Janir Clay, Victor Rower. Marumlungoy Ablaus Kabong, Haru Wilter. Martmao Niraiwit, Ignacio, Nagpangamasagi Msyol. Ang iwala nga niya Raymond Duloong, Mahilewat Hermeted. Balidio, Yuki Oshmul, Toshio Nakamura, and Haru Malig. Sonsrola Mariano Carlos, Toby Pablo Kiosi. Of them all, Itrigil Diril Kay, ang ngaringi Victor Belau, direct ngaringi Billy G. Cuarte, Mangak, Mabunyo Nakamura, Maringi Juana Rongulbay, Marim Tinoloong, Masayuki Adalbay, Masagi Masyol, Yuki Oshmul, Mariano Carlos. Kasi, dia bilang bahasa ini, aku maduli, hidup terletak. Yang legot terkeluar kemang, ayah atribul Paulus solo, meleyang gest, alarin tinulong, siltan aklatori 2.133, kemudian masih kita turun melil. Aku mesra kita harus melil, sila matra 1986, 85, and 52 gil. Mesir time gila 46, mga marathon 23. Ya to minister, ito na terul clergyman, mga Father Felix, Reverend Billy Cuarte, mga tenor educators, Alfonso Oitrong, Masami Siksay, Toshio Nakamura, Niraiwet Ignacio, Candidate Principal School Mertmau, Juana Rongulbay, Masaki Masyol, Masayuki Adalbay, Satang Silmay, Joshua Koshiba, and Moses Romaroy. Oktoy sila mamamla educators. And then imol physician, Dr. Peloy, maningingil old-timer, maningil Dean or convention, Paulus Solo. Direct maringi Santos Silicon, kaporam le community leader. At mura Arashobay, Kuniwa Nakamura, Johnny Reply, Tinulong, Peter Sugiyama, Yuki Oshmul. Journalist, Bonifacio Basilius. Mga senators Uduy, Masali, Marasio Oyame, Kuniwa Nakamura. Civil servants, mga Hero Termitate, Raymond Ulong, Haru Wilter, tigit-tigit na government service. Mga sinisak sa mga judge, ang underestimate ang ito ating naralan commission. Mga 8 lawyers. Caleb Uduy, Victor Belau, Carlos Sali, Jan Targong, Mariano Carlos, Mangak, at hindi Imoradil, Dil Belau, Juana Rongulbay. Sino ba si Premier Mesay nga nala, tanggal titil missing. Joshua Koshiba, Dr. Peloy, Mabaulis Salo, tanggal favor a parliamentary system. At the end ay badul, matagil wasay, apek tukoy buhay, agir nga opposition. Seksilu biar kamsi kalau gura arbal gung itu. Masa tidak betul ipitar rogu yang buat amlai. Kena terkini lo balas, bersih ke soma, kena tiri. Ini ada merah rogir. Serta ini iblo molir tramo presiden convention. Ini time lagi vote mau lebih betul. Ini nak lebih gilta, ini dilat. Kau lagi vote, ya kali itu yang ma 19, harus lebih ma 19. Kau muda musim kau. Yang letal orang yang avoid, murah harus beli blanca murah. Kali itu di diul, uplo 18. Magi melulul, ukti itu murah put, eka secret ballot. Di serta ya teman sektor konspirasi, kamu turun ke mana? Ya po angin gesel por senkyo, yang dia lulus senkyo ni. Orang itu terus aku siapa melulus senkyo ni. Ngalita ni. Makto masih kau bersenkyo ta. Nampak apa tu orang masih kalau dia senkyo mata. Makasak senkyo kali kudu dia kata melulus rawat melala arab lur belau. Masih melamo di tuol. Masih kira aku sermat lahar orang beli lagi ada berbeza rabli lu. Masih kita ngelihat history juga. Kita berpresenta kali bukan aku belum betul. Lahar orang beli ke, ane clerk of court ada dalam lejan sedikit di stan. Kita malam bukan artian di stan. Mungkin orang hands off leader. Ni kamam magi ngabu. Yang malak ruriul. Mesti kita no uli harus melihat no hotel presiden travel Belau. Toleh nasulero waktu ketika ada dalam sertai. Orang masa rupra gidori 8 kakmur lah. Within 63 days. Ya kira-kira ulrela. Ini saya ngira April 2nd, lo dia kalau first. It was a food stay. Kalau misalnya nak ambil draft tersebut lah, lun motor convention, legal council or lun berapa. Misal sengkyo norni na July 9, o bosin lah yang tu July 9. Masih morni sil first full moon day, ra July, yang happen full raja. July 9, happen babandera ngarbelo. Kau ada sesuatu itu boy. Masih gue masih time. Ya, atau Belau serta manlik keluar support di mana convention. Abek di Belau mengis semua, lagi mengakles demi orang mereka. Lulu kira, serta yang wilayah mana. Yang Januari meralayak kira-kira mengesek. Atau Belau manlik orang, mengelum masa Belau buang arah future ni, menjadi renaissance. Belau Belau. Kira-kira berapa masa 60 days. Ini soal mungkin kira-kira muktabul amendment. Kira-kira compact. Kira-kira ulang lagi kami interfere. Prof. Father Felix. Ada lagi tu Belau tarigil mal. Si fight. Kira Palauan sovereignty dia kamu interfere ini evik pondor edin. Seperti itu. Bira Rosenblatt, ya dia lagi given. Select draft renewal administration, awasi the draft constitution which shall make allowance for the compact of free association. It ratifies as in the sovereign. Paulum lot twice lagi singkyo, Senlorina July 9, 1979, ability was void. Mo saying ako, yagi mo promote a revised constitution. Let's say na mama bani kasya procedures. Accommodate ra compact na legal transit. Mula state di mo yung ilang Slovak. Mula dual citizenship lagi malara buhay. Yan bora senkyo. Yan di malaka mo mo. Undur ni sil final senkyo ra July ra 1980. Ulo mo legal pre senkyo. Yung mga ilibela na kasi ikot. Kita mo kodir. Kalau kita mau tulis beri, buat beri, orang kita beri. Menjadi di bawah konstitusi, Mumlewi dengan el di bawah yang mengakampak. Saya aktif siapa belur Belau. Mospel ketemu orang wakar ni, dor. Sindi nggak bawa dongeng lagi udik lo. Bagi kita nak ketpok lataran si tak ada ikut terpromondar ni. Engel Bonifacio Basilius am lecture dengan mami release self provisional out malagwasi. Dia ka bona fide reporter. The force ni disclose the source the information ni. Ulo bela ko free. Simple la Bonifacio amendment provision. Erulil wasi dia ka document mangidil meeting na kalmen el berrot. Simple wasi. Ang alita mo faithful to the Constitution. Oltela out mo silo dia matrel berix. Miselo siya capital mo ram lebeok. Man mora pakaltao. Dia kaldung mora within 10 years. Masih kita designate ni. Lor ni. Seguidan lo roba boys se ke propose ni. Dek mora Singapore yang sama se tiap ni Belau le Belau sim kampanye na Budweiser boys. Malmo live. Yang terjadi betul le politik serasi lo. Sem lang ayan de gotten si Oktober ni aja so kosiba. Bagi me debate bring lo kalak ni. Dia masih aboy sa dia lumkawat. Maagong kawat. O kasi hindi boy sa ruling ng biyot kumangkawat. E kati roy de mo siya. E oles ang mok may dalingin mo libre. E nanisil part na paludol wasi. Nusog LAPS balud bodungul ni. Si proposer Ramano Carlos. E si yun sa mapia. Muli part na sa West Islands. Ligilo Indonesia after the war. Ayer del Malaya ni le pedra to ori. Belum trigger mara mapia mo na Netherlands. Ang logyong del Belau siya tayo. Betul kan betul. Betul mak di Belau mak Palau belum beri lagi masalah ini. Si beri Belau di tu Belau seperti ini yang boleh ini sepalau. Yang beri nanti jen sama mak ekor terlalu lah. Yang Palauan nama umil mak. Betul lah state menurut itu lo. Kita ni municipality. Esen tu state itu tiap California kurang makhluk lah. Opera international law state blue. Bagi si, muda kita kerang klel, bagi dia ang klel state, pun betul governors belum ada governors. Jadi itu kalau itu lah tu, siro si kemama ada Belau, si kemama mengkit, dia aku lagi dan digit, kemama you speak to the world. Dia tu lagi murura, utimilah lut, ya terang mal kikoler ni manggil dia no ser kemama or sing, jangan or sing, oiden motu or Belau. Dia kata, kalau ini motor orang Belau, tinggal sekam orang orang segi. Ini orang segi masih bisa terima waktu. Dia terah mal. Yang nak mah orang kuartian lera preamble, lo berdingin siapa nol buat lima saud ni. Sudah kalau kita kau mengarah masih ni ciksa kesana tak. Boleh fasih diurus tak. Segi the last phrase. Gimula ni o singgil mo niya sila Diyos setial o timerandud. Diyos pera ordo del homeland. Plumamara rol. Siento mesringin what you currently inspired by some divine intervention. Pabela maling lungil at dalam lo happy. Mantiara mo terdosaw, terdiwasi abelang nomor tangat. Terkira siltan ng luud from different places they come together. Yung naka-brainer deal, di mo i-mokol deal. Di mo naka debate, debate ang man bring. Di mo hit a common goal. Di mo guiding star man, abalur Belau. Malura masura de plan, but kita say, Indonesia second contention. Di mo siya al-sir di Matei. Kukno sumok lagil, legrel, sabagil, wala citizenship, pero magiging tingnan bigyan ang anggo. By the way, tarano araw Belau, pilsa pasport ni, ang kinalgila ang ribong lo, ang doradois, grandchild ni, mal bland dan dir Belau. Dia pun masih gini, dia masuk dia, undang suara Sildilia Pastor Billy Corte, Sil Prison Kruma. Agimara attach ma IA Arsenal. Ikalak kau ma atrai kau ma kasi kamso di sil mara Bible say the still small voice. Ikaw say akot itsigitan mo sa ni. First seek ye the kingdom of God. And all these things will come unto you. They was said, take it as sundarangan ni Belau. And so yan ang model bayak. Magkano malulema sulis, take it out of siltan, malulur kiram. Ang Glenn was that most they could participate and did something for Palau. Now, mula Father Felix, adi milyo ko tukor Belau. Ikamawa siya tukor Amerikil na por nga conflict. Ikatafalaw na English language. Second convention, author talaga say, kami kom atergear. Kita ater Belau. Ya tar ulang alit at tukor Belau. Maging na amin ringi mo ay say. Sir tukor abi le reference kwartiya kung simbaringi. That yang a law of nature. Kumansa.
Ya me volví a entrar en un tomato Am Saul que da ita la amor del time en el último que ministerio vol so dice el tengo la programa aquí es el ves el Google que da la mo me siguen así.
Jawok ngatetal ngartian akti el morsel lungerul segment tial sils el sel rodondas lo hace seguir el ama mo lo ngartian amo capture ay caído ro uil el al sils el moru liu timer gif adange our history mel mute el al sils makti mo te alle akti ne askra ngabo jangan pal introduction ni le kita tim mengeling garubak jangan nak melengil waseng jangan artial el bare al sils marores ngira rasio by the way ya amuel gal rasio directo lo sisulta me make sure que document ni le haga historical event mang actimo mul por seguir acá era lo me umisa temeden tergive gora sa mlo na mote me la suel ere holiday jaka do bor adan galera di mir gide di era me gira kabo agidim le ada dura total no hace ya gida gora mote telel mo matak kristial balbat makli toy bayel sel 12th century mode of information on market cloud was mo last longer in 10 to 15 minutes I get 5W sel imol 8. Arange. Oh, 5W I get what, why, where, who sel imol 8 sel how. Arange mung di mo kutete alle please mo medwel gamra. Ang nakabo Roman Bedor.
Is relevant. Interesting sa loro, nasa history na kita ada Belau la Constitution and Convention and rule Rusia Constitution ni ngaka matatal follow a event setal as things happen I write it down. Throughout the years I get my note. Langara 4 or 5 years ago in Lorgia, there was a conference at PCC, El Eurablu, by Tinarore. And I was asked to be one of the guest speakers. And I gave the history of, what I have in my note. Our students at PCC were not aware of what has happened in the past. the history that has been and why we went to the Constitution to have a constitutional convention. There's a history on the government of Palau that is being taught at Palau High School. I was recruited to be one of the members of the board or the commission that reviewed the history book. My concern was, at that time, was that there is no transition from the trust territory government to the government today. So the history books that they have in Palau High School are being taught is there is no transition. And I think that is a very important part of history that needs to be there. Has to be a connection. Why we decide to have a constitutional government. And so I decided then that maybe I should put books, just to put things together. And then one day we were drinking coffee, and I met a professor who was a student at that time, who was doing his thesis in Palau, and we talked about the history of Palau. She heard what I was advising her about the history, and said, maybe you should write a book. And she is now Professor Rebecca from the Colorado State University. Can you stand up? At that time, she was doing her thesis. She was not a professor yet, and she just, and so I tried to put everything together, to cover the time that we were under the trust territory to the time that we became independent. And so the title of the book is Palau from the Colonial Outpost to Independent Nation. And I have some pictures of the in the book. And so what has been discussed this morning is the history about the Constitutional Convention and the preparation for the Constitution. I take it back to the time of the trust territory. And I also talk about a little bit of Japanese administration, German, and Spanish. And let me just read you something that you will read in the chapter of the book. Here, the force of the colonial might was too strong for us to overcome in all these years. There was nothing that we could do to stop the heavy hands of the colonialism, individually or collectively, on our islands and our lives, despite our right to assert ourselves as an indigenous of this place. We stood by helplessly and watched these colonial nations and their national as they parade all over the islands, changing the makeup of our ancestral home, defining our rights, and shaping our existence as a people and as a society. As a society and as a people, we cease to exist in our ancestral home. Only when the anthropologists came to conduct their field study on us did we exist as a people and as a society. After they left, we ceased to exist, except in the chapter of their books, their journal, or their articles for their doctoral thesis stored away in the university library or the museum somewhere beyond our reach. All this time, we were a foreigner. We were a tenant of a foreign nation in our own homelands. Maybe I should step back and tergiver buka ver a past lo ase ngara o singe dengi leng selmo sura history Belau ma umu ya book And what I did clear was it was a peaceful society, not near art, Akmo direct wise ay gel mal pepeda titigan malus na el me mangela George Keith malus story Captain Wilson naksay tangin wasi nothing that can be more interesting to a man than the history of men. The navigator of a great age have pictured to us our own species in barbarity of lives. The manner of civilized nation bears upon the strong resemblance of each other. It is the vice or virtues of individuals that create a great civilizations. Whereas in the countries which science or gentle art have never reached, we observe a wonderful disparity. Some are found under the darkness and absolute barbarism, from the side of which the humanity gladly turn aided, while the other unaided, unassistance, but by a mere natural good sense, have not only emerged from this gloomy shade, but nearly attained that order, property, and good conduct which constitute the essence of a real civilization. That's Palau. OML grammar, a lot of people say that, who wrote about us, say that we're a bunch of the lazy people because they see us at the young level, pastor, the honor, the rule. Grammar, we cannot deny that they have a moment of bravery, but persistence is not their strong point. And that is why Palauans native are called lazy. The cause is that one that affects so many others, people. There are favorable living conditions, small populations, and look at in small populations. It is unfair to call Palauans Islander lazy when they have such a fine house, long and broad stone road. Think of the labor that the women do in the taro field. You cannot say that such people are lazy. Palauan native seems industrious, orderly, and somewhat melancholy, and quite serious. It is the difference you find between an honest peasant woman and a dashing city girl. Elang kabuk ngale a grammar. Ingele ka corner panet narangarat ang buk malu sulwasi. Palauans, he wrote that Palauan consider a leisure of time as their right only to be interrupted by the necessity of work. We had everything for us that we need. So the society was good. Belau. Bak akuram letak saya yin. Emergoyo direct ngania pun wasingil wasi. The effect of the four colonizing nations on us, Spain to Germany, Germany to Japan, create a different character of personality. Like my father, I used my example that my great grandparents were more to be a quasi-Spanish. My grandfather was molded to be a German, quasi-German. My father was molded to be a quasi-Japanese, and I grew up to mimic the American lifestyle. So you see how a discussion is being carried at home at night. It's like members of one orchestra that each one of them want to play his own music, his own instrument, all at different times. Seguida para mleo singe geringi lulmesa. Ikaw say maybe I should do something. So the perception in the book is based on my observation and based on my view. Otherwise, at that time, at cross territory, we talk about fundamental rights. Margoy kita ada bela direct, where the more constitution kita ada. Man MCC say we have a bill of rights, we have all of this, as compared to the other islands. I remember the time when Surang Vips came from school. From the States. After residing in the States for several years, he returned with his family to establish in Palau. The first thing that he wanted to do was to be a farmer and to raise chickens in Irai. He went to EDLF to apply for 72,000 loan to establish chicken poultry in Irai. And he was rejected. The law at that time disqualified him because of they disqualified him as a non-citizen because his wife was an American, and by his marriage to his wife as an American citizen, he was considered as a non-citizen. He came to the legal service because he's been in the States for so long. He knew his rights, and he wanted us to sue the government. And we took his case, and we filed the case to challenge the EDLF Act. The district attorney of Palau all of a sudden decided to leave the islands, and so there was no one to represent the government. So they had to get the district attorney from Yap to come to Palau. And so the district attorney from Yap came, and I knew he was not prepared. It turned out to be John Ruur. And this is what Judge Hefner asked us. Tell me, Mr. Ruur, are you or are you not a citizen of the Trust Territory? And Mr. Ruur said, by all means, I am a citizen of the Trust Territory. And he said, what about your wife? Aren't you in the same boat as Surang and Wips? Surang and Wips is married to a citizen, an American citizen, and he has been declared by an American citizen married to a Palauan citizen that he is not a citizen. Neil Morris was chairman of EDLF board and was married to a Palauan lady. And who told the Surang that Surang is not qualified because he's not. And so right there in the end, just Hefner ruled on the bench that the law is unconstitutional and discriminatory. So Surang was supposed to receive the $72,000 loan, but so we got him to the office and we said we have won the case. And he said, never mind, I'm not going to be a farmer. I just want to prove my point that I was right and I'm going to be a tour guide. So he became a one-man tour in the Rock Islands, and from there he built his business. After several years, John, they decided to have a Palauan wife. It's in the book. But Surang continue with this wife. And one of the things that I talk about the book is they talk about the Superport. Superport was a big project that was supposed to be in Palau, and it was really supporting the Superport. So they got Robert Panero from New York, who is the promoter of the project, to come to Palau. And there was an announcement that there is going to be a public hearing conducted by Palau legislature. And Robert Panero, who is the promoter of the supporter, is on the islands. And so they asked the public to go. They asked the members of the group, Palau organization, to go. So Ibadul was our chairman. The May Otod was the vice chairman, and Surangan was the treasurer, and Moses was our spokesman. Ibadul decided not to go to the hearing, but just told us to go to the hearing. We went there to the hearing, and it was packed, the courtroom. And the Committee on Judiciary and Governmental Affairs was presided by Tadao Motel, legislator Tadao Motel. He was the chairman of Judiciary and Governmental Affairs. Masachi Itangel was the vice chairman. And the rest are all from Babadao. We were, and I'm reading it from here, that we were young and innocent who just came from college. We never experienced any political reality in Palau. We were taught that we were going to have a fair hearing. And Suraman was the only person who was involved in the scuba diving. So we asked him to be our spokesman. We went there, and there's Tadao over there. And he looked at us, and before we start our presentation, he asked Suran, as our chairman, "Are you from Maralong?" I said, "No." He looked at me and he asked me, "Are you from Maralong?" I said, "No." And he asked Moses and everyone, and none of us was from Maralong. So he said, "Then stop talking about the Soul Reef, because it's not your reef." So Suram had his presentation that was supposed to be given, said that, but the oil spill that will destroy the reef of Maralong will destroy it. And he said, "No, but it's not your reef. Don't talk about Maralong. You are not from Maralong." And so he started crying, literally crying with tears. And he started crying, with tears, and we felt really bad. So he said, "Let's go then." And Suran stood up and he said, "Can I request to make just one comment?" And said, "Yes." And he said, "You do not know the beauty of underwater in Palau, because you're not diving like myself. One of these days, people around the world will travel at a great distance just to see the beauty of Palau. And that will be a lot of money. It will be more than..." And Chairman Palau Motel said, "Is that all?" "Yes." He said, "Okay, you better leave now." So we left, and just 2 or 3 years ago, we went to the funeral in Ngaranon. Then he kept calling his Surang and myself and Mirakel, and he said, "Hey, Madray Belau, I'm in seat here." And my Madray Belau is chief title from Ngaranon. And so we were sitting next to him, and he said, "You did not know that you are from Maralong? You are wearing the chief title of Madray Belau Maralong, and you have constructed the biggest house in Maralong." So no, we didn't know. So that's, I talk about those time, before then leading into the Constitutional Convention. We had 3 referendum on the Constitution. Mr. Toribio talked about the revise. The revise is the US version of our Constitution. This is the revised Constitution, and that's the original Constitution. You will not find this revised anywhere, because there was a campaign to take all of the revised and threw them away in the waste basket. So I was able to, but one of the things that we did on the campaign on the Super 4, that we used the media. We were using Belau newspaper, and we were defeating the people from the government because they went to Singapore and they didn't have money. So they went to Romantutur to borrow $25,000 to finance a trip. And we learned about it, so we put that on the newspaper. And it was supposed to be a sellout. Because Moses called and he said, it was about an hour later, he called me and he said, the newspaper is sold already. We don't have a single copy. So we looked around and there was no newspaper in every store, restaurant that we. And I said that this would be the first time that we found out later that Roman Tool paid Palau trolley to go around. Every time we deliver, he buy everything. So as soon as we put the newspaper in the store, then somebody would go and buy everything. And those were the games. So I talk about 3 referendum on the Constitution. If we add 2 referendum on the amendment, it will be 5 on the Constitution. Then I talk about the 8 referendum on the compact. And making comparison with the FSM, because the FSM had only 1 referendum on the Constitution and the Marshall Islands, and also 1 referendum on the compact. We had to have 8 to approve the compact of free association, and we had to have 3 referendum to approve the Constitution. So it's really a special case for us, but as Mr. Torbion was saying, the strength and the determination of the people of Palau, kept us, what we are today. We still have our own language, we still have our own culture because of the strength that we have. Everything is in the book, so you will read from the book, and I hope I have enough copy for everyone. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, now John Rule is Belau, Belau of Mau, and Censuran Luis is Chief Recomsi. So they are both a member of the Council of Chiefs.
Wala ngaruba ka tiang ablagi ano do ni ruhei launching it kalbo kan gil di more traditional leaders. I bedul tingarubak di for today. I bedul ma tingarubak mal graciously en motto da tiarbo gore lalsins. O se el momento ni seguida que el tema Marseille ngaruba inabora el mengu la vaiga. E allo do a sentia mo charge ni the rangal usually half price. O di kahale bakri tiang. Ay gimle se trate verse se el gol break tiang. En gol break ay gero activity bel announce a director o en le setup el mo sente bonarse mo nia mo sai na happy only for those people here. Oh, ese era la más modira ahora por Oklo.
Ya buka di melakukan part of program relations. Dia di melakukan memora officer Google Belau elang. Di melimam kalau hotel, tentang mau hotel. We never really advertise it to us. Minister Education ako bilang mo malagay yung minister kaya dili termil mata asyonal mulan mamal bol kasi mungil bol partra lagi dili program awalum lo dapat minister kira ro bol belar lang ese di blegi el bukti mam isa sa mama rulira bekta ya Nilai mesin menjadi I hope ini nak semua. Ada semua mengosong sebelum demo sakit. Mungkin. Akhirnya kan saya terangkan bahasa again Aigel selongira skogi ma prodansia le pinta limbe tela. Ngakali ilan mo din lang. Ngania ngal gel lo sama gel rogo el am kadal ali usuel benyami.
Se man saula ni habo medam sakor kor alo ese kada marmara lo bongora sel pingel la chis di era bong simre men polini te trigel tiram le ngatiang ne ata sel got lo mala sel ot mala la lo tan mo or to stira kor pot le ta bang ta era chis Saul tiga itu luar ngajang kelemahan tengah kalau boleh berat tiga orang ini lajis. Jadi kalau bagi tiga buku legal serong erul lom selalu Allah jadi ngajang mau bagi tiga buku orang jadi serong regulasi. Kalau boleh ngajang. Jadi man Saul jadi ngajang ke man sudah di rumah. Akan mungkin mereka sudah berkelak, gudul, arugul Belau, abilung, terigal masalah tiang, terigal justice saling terigal rahort, tangkal ministers, tawet representa senate, senator sangat tiang, speaker mar delegates, terigal speaker ngaralong ngasay, keteman tengah tiang saya ilungin, saya singgah berbuat, waigel namudung nangadu. Kalau muro ode me berakal untuk tata rubak, bembo tira pastol bertiang, sendiri tiara bang.
Kado dulu rubak kadiosa gimral nulis mer mamel kira la ungil history rab luma mer blu belau. Tiang ode me berakam la memo di belum mal mutu lengalak la. Ra a blessing sa kau to ubet sa blue mer ikabar dengan ya kabel mentor kamam syukur kamam le klobo leungin nani au lo kareu mabti kareng ta sila belum aki mol ngit ma te gide berti kareng kau mau koreo kau ma au li ur kau pa pol el mol ma el mora pass on to our young generation aki dire kemal ngira mam la se ai gide bla document ta tira gide ahora realmente quiere la volluil mo ultra school maran kamel bran mei bolo da lite gidel ne diakla biot lurior ne obra en vi moya ka oti kai ka kau mau lo kero kau ya kis amal ngarabuto e kiel ngarabti kereng e ka hol la drona amal musaura e suelo mal lampot mokla tidak ada terblay mau ketemu magi pemalabu krisi rabangam mol melomong kumamre asils artian mal to ubet sil srablumam agang lu ame o sam ngara pera Jesus amen.
Alway seguide tiga tretelela ideolite trigel le serot mala il polamorse masya sing trigel first masegen luego sul vacío la morse mar peclada direga ser ngatian masya sing moria suel ya ulu sia sing yang ira wa morse ya koni terkomia morse ngabur gide sain komal sul peclada.
But they taste the same, you know.
Yeah.